What's up, Internet? Well, it's been a terrible year for me, and I think it goes without saying there's going to be some terrible games as well. This is my top 10 poop games of 2018. The games that should not be aired near an open flame. They're just that much garbage. So, get ready to flush these ones down the toilet because these are the worst of this year. Now, before we get into the list proper, I want to give special Lagoon Awards of games so bad, and yet I couldn't stop playing them, to eeesh, a game you will spawn in and fall through the floor pretty much immediately, takes about 20 minutes to actually render textures, and hit detection and everything is an absolute joke, and you'll die really quick because reasons. And yet, it's still a pretty fun game. I want to see a sequel to this, but I want to see it actually done well and competently, although I'm not wildly hopeful about it. I'd like to also give a Lagoon Award of terrible game that I still couldn't stop playing to Kingdom Come Deliverance. Hey, let's make Oblivion, but make it worse and make it somewhat more historically accurate to the real world. And yet, despite the fact that I completely forgot the controls here, despite the fact that I'm over-encumbered and moving slow, I still played this for, instead of like 5 minutes to actually get footage, about an hour just because I was having a blast knocking people out and stealing all their pants. I don't know why, but this game is engrossing, and it's annoying that it's so slow and clumsy and doesn't work properly, but man, interesting game, and it's definitely a fun little alternative to, say, Oblivion. Anyway, kicking off the actual list, we have number 10, Young Merlin. Let's make an old school adventure game on the Super Nintendo. Let's fill it full of charm. Let's also cram a bunch of really crappy minecart segments that take too long into it, and also enemies that are designed to fight you in a game where fighting is not a thing you should ever be doing. This game is bad in pretty much every regard, and it sucks because the presentation is actually pretty good, and I want to actually explore this world. I want to interact with it. I want to see what's more out there, but everything in the actual game itself wants me to not be around it remotely close, and wants you to be as far away from it because bad minecart sections. And what's more mind-blowing is as bad minecart sections are, there's even more bad minecart sections after that. And I couldn't even fathom what that would be like. I gave up at that point, but man, this game looks good, plays like garbage. Moving on to number 9, SD Gundam Force Showdown, a game based off a really bad Gundam Anniversary project. This is a really depressing randomized dungeon crawler with basically no difficulty curve and just random badness. And I mean, this is the first boss. You can kill it without moving around. You have 3 playable characters, one of which is entirely useless, the second of which is only mostly useless, and then you've got your starting character who has a gun and is completely dominating because he has a gun. This game is unbalanced, it feels untested, and it's just unfun. But you know, it's pretty indicative of the series it was also based on, so I mean, points for being accurate to the actual experience of watching the show, I guess, but that's not really a good thing. Next is number 8. We move on from Gundam to still kind of Gundam with Versus Hero, a one-on-one fighting game where you play as an SD Kamen Rider, Ultraman, or Gundam of your choosing, and then you have to proceed to stand in your opponent to actually hit them because you're an SD Gundam. I've said this before, but man, these things are not made to fist fight because they do not have the reach. Why you'd think turning it into a fist fighting game would work, I have no idea, but it certainly does not. It's also very slow, very jerky, very clumsy, and it stutters a lot for just a standard Game Boy game. It's remarkable how much this game does not work properly. Bad handheld game is bad. Moving on to number 7, bad handheld game is bad. We've got, I think this translates to Goldfish Warning. This is a weird sort of minigame collection, kind of. Basically, you run around this school trying to collect stamps for your stamp card to finish a stamp rally, but in order to get stamps, you have to finish minigames. Now that's not too bad, except about 70% of the minigames are based on random. Be it rock, paper, scissors, be it selecting the proper path to get the hot dog to the cow, I guess. Be it just walking through the right doors so that you don't get a completely impossible minigame. I can only think of 2 or 3 that are actually based around skill, one of which is like a card flipping game where you have to erase cards, another being kind of a matching game sort of, but again it's based on rock, paper, scissors, so good luck. Basically this game is just awful. And it's sad because there's not really much to it either. At least if they made it more varied or more interesting or less based on random, it would at least be playable. But as it stands, it's basically just a random number generator of bad. Next we have number 6, another import. This is Bastard on the Super Famicom. What even is this game? It's like half fighting game, half shooter, but you can't control your shots. You can't seem to actively go up and hit your opponent. I've tried to play this game a couple of times and with a few different people, and no one can understand what the hell this thing is even supposed to be. It feels kind of like someone saw a Dragon Ball Z game and said, you know, let's try and make that, but take away the Dragon Ball Z-ness and possibly quality. I don't know, I've never played Dragon Ball Z except for that one GameCube game that everyone hates, but this game is just completely confusing garbage that doesn't really work. And, you know, if it doesn't work, how am I supposed to enjoy it? I guess the ultimate key point is you're not. You're supposed to suffer and then turn it off and then never play it again. Good thing it was cheap, but you know, that's not really saying much when there's not much to actually enjoy or experience here. Moving on to number 5, a game very indicative of my feelings to the console, StarLink on the Switch. Hey, let's make an awesome game about creating a custom spaceship. You know what would be great? A bunch of dogfighting, collecting stuff, and defeating opponents, becoming like some kind of crazy space mercenary, an awesome ultimate space pilot. You know what would be even better? Driving around your spaceship like it's a car on the planet for the entire goddamn game. Said no one ever, and yet this thing exists. I don't know how you create a concept like create a custom spaceship game and then decide to ignore the fact there's spaceships entirely. There's basically no space battles, there's no air battles, it's all on the ground, driving around your spaceship like it's a car, and it's the weirdest thing ever. And that's not even talking about the fact it's one of those buy a bunch of toys so that you can continue to enjoy our product sort of games. And what makes it even more fantastic, if you buy the digital version, you basically get all the toys in one without any of the actual toys, whereas if you buy the physical version, you need all the toys in order to unlock everything. Why did we buy these toys? Oh yeah, because it came with an R-Wing. Fair enough. Man, this game is bad, and I have no idea how you just ignore your core concept, but this game completely misses the point, and it couldn't miss the point harder if it was pointed in the opposite direction of the point, and said to walk all the way around the Earth, hoping to find the point at some point. No points are to be had in this game, but you probably see my point. Moving on from one bad Switch game to another, we have number 4, The World Ends With You, Final Remix. Alright, well, I could stop you before you even said, let's remake The World Ends With You on the Switch, because The World Ends With You was designed for the DS. It was the only game to utilize every single function of the DS without it becoming really dumb or gimmicky. And this game regulates all of that to holding one of the Switch controllers, pointing it at the screen, and button mashing and hoping stuff works. Now, that offends me quite a lot in terms of pretty much any and all game design sensibilities, but this game actually looks great, and the soundtrack is, well, there's some remix tracks that were okay, but not many. But the thing that offends me most is this game is basically unplayable, and more importantly to me, it takes a game that was not only important to me, but a game that was very personally important to me, and completely flushes everything that game meant down the toilet. The nice thing is I can still go back to my DS and play the original, and I probably will after this because, let's just be honest, it's easily one of the best DS games, but this game is just garbage, and I hope, if nothing else, my purchase helps make a better one in the future, maybe, but I doubt it. This game is just bad, and Square Enix has not been able to make a good remake of anything they've ever put their name on since the Game Boy Advance. Let's just be completely fair and honest there. Moving on to number 3, we have Fire Emblem Requiem. Oh, what's that? You made a fan game? Well, it doesn't make it exempt from this list if it's terrible. This is a fan-made hack of the very first Fire Emblem we got in North America, except it's entirely impossible. I have tried to beat this prologue no less than 35 times. I have gotten several other people in to try and beat this prologue. No one can do it. You have 2 playable characters, a whole swack of completely unplayable teammates that make really stupid decisions, an incredible number of enemies to fight off, 2 characters that appear to be recruitable, but no matter what I do, you can't recruit them. Oh yeah, and they decide to drop a bloody dragon rider in 3 turns after. And there doesn't seem to be any consistent strategy to actually surviving this. This is damn near impossible, and this is just the prologue, the thing before the actual game starts. And you would think that this is maybe a fight you're supposed to lose or something. No, you have to win this. It's just basically impossible. Seriously, this game needed some like balance tweaks or some QA testing or something, but this does not work. As much as I love the idea of fans creating games and stuff, this is just atrocious. Moving on to number 2, we go back to something I'm very passionate about, done horribly. This is new Gundam Breaker. Mind you, not Gundam Breaker 4. No, this is new Gundam Breaker. Well, you know what? I want to stick to old Gundam Breaker, thank you. Why is it the only 2 Gundam games we've gotten since the PS2 have just been terrible? Seriously, it was Gundam Versus last year, and it's now Gundam Breaker. You know, the thing that was my refuge for how bad Gundam Versus has become. Well, now they've ruined that too. Awesome. First and foremost, you have less parts and options than the previous games, so that's fun. Although I have heard they've been adding more and more through free updates, which is kind of cool, but then you also only have like 6 stages that all play the exact same, because every single stage is based around collecting points based on doing randomized tasks, which means there's no actual adventure to it, there's no actual progression through the world or stories. It's really just do these random things, collect some parts, and try and enjoy yourself. And honestly, try and enjoy yourself is the best way to describe this game, because honestly, I had to force myself to try and enjoy this game. And I want to repeat that, I had to force myself to try and enjoy Gundam, a thing that I already love. You guys screwed up, Namco Bandai, and you took the thing that was probably the best thing Gundam had ever produced since they decided to destroy what was so awesome about Gundam Versus, and basically made it into the next Gundam Versus by completely throwing everything that made it great out the window. Awesome. Alright, now we move on to the biggest piece of garbage this year, the biggest poop that will need an absolute titan of a plunger to flush this thing. Number 1, The Secret of Mana. Alright, so remember what I said about The World Ends With You, about how Square Enix can't seem to make a good remake, and about how what really sucks is not only did you take a great game and make it bad, but you took something that was personally important to me and you just took a giant dump on it? Secret of Mana is one of the most important games in my life. And to make a good remake, it's not hard. You take what worked from the original, you fixed what doesn't. Instead, what they did is they took what didn't work in the first game, they made it work even less well, and then they decided to throw everything else out the window. Characters are now voiced poorly, the music is remade, and with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, all the songs are bad, and even those exceptions are inferior to the original iterations. Hit detection and the way combat works is even more broken than ever, and it just looks incredibly dated compared to a Super Nintendo game. And I'm not saying that as someone who's incredibly nostalgic for the Super Nintendo, don't get me wrong, I am, but it just looks bad compared to the original sprite-based artwork, which had a lot more detail and just looked better polished. This looks like a half-assed, low-budget Unity game, and that's because that's what it is. Similar to the remake of the previous Mana game, Final Fantasy Adventure. And the most baffling thing is, we already had a remake of that, and it was way better than the remake you just made of it. This is depressing that this exists, and like I said, this is a game that is personally important to me, so it stings all the more, and honestly, I knew going into this it was never going to be good, but I wanted to hope it was. I absolutely did, because of how personally important the Secret of Mana is. But the sad fact is, it ain't. This is, by far, the biggest piece of poop I've had to play this year. And that says a lot, because I've also had to play Fire Emblem Requiem, Gundam Breaker, and StarLink, and Square Enix's other attempt at a remake, The World Ends With You. This is just blanket terrible in pretty much every respect. But, you know, if you want some good Square Enix remakes, just go play the Game Boy Advance games and don't touch anything else, because they need to stop remaking stuff because they clearly cannot do it. They don't have the passion, they don't have the resources, and they don't care to try. Those are the worst games of 2018. Those are the biggest pieces of poop I've had the misfortune of having to play, but we're not quite done yet because I want to hear what your worst games of this year were in the comments. Because I'm sure there's tons I missed out on, and I want to know which ones to avoid. But I will probably have to talk about them at some point because this is my job. Still, it would be nice to have some warning ahead of time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, subscribe to the channel to see more awesome stuff by me, and if you really want to make my day, check out my Patreon, support me there, get yourself on the Patreon supporters Discord, and we can talk about how bad all these games are as we play them. Because if you have more people around to vent about how bad games are, they get a little less bad. Or at least become a little bit more bearable. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Peace out, Internet.